Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, former first-round safety Johnathan Abram was waived by the Silver and Black on Tuesday. We'll talk about that, plus what it could possibly mean for the Raiders team moving forward, and we'll talk about why I don't think there's any single chance that the Raiders lose this game on Sunday to the Colts, which actually kind of scares me, to be honest with you. But we'll talk about that coming up in segment number 2. Then your calls and texts will close things out in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, Wednesday, November 9th, 2022.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen each and every day. Remember, you can find the Locked On Raider podcast free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. We're having a lot of fun getting these shows up on YouTube, starting to get a lot of good feedback as well from being on YouTube, so we definitely do appreciate that. And big shout out to my man Ari, who's trying really hard each and every day to, one, work with me, get me to do what I'm supposed to do so he can do what he's supposed to do. But at Ari Produces on Twitter, does a fantastic job and is really trying to get us all in sync with what we're supposed to do here on YouTube. Today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast is being brought to you by betonline.net. They've got you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. betonline.net. That is where the game starts. And Raider Nation, where do I start? But at the top, right? The biggest news that rolled out with the Silver and Black on Tuesday was the fact that Johnathan Abram was waived. And he was a first-round draft pick back in 2019. The Raiders drafted Cleve Ferrell, number 4. They had drafted Josh Jacobs, number 24 overall. And then, of course, number 27 was Johnathan Abram. And look, I don't think that there's any surprise that Johnathan Abram is not part of the Raiders' long-term plans, right? He's a guy that did not get his fifth-year option picked up by the Silver and Black, this new regime, Dave Ziegler, Champ Kelly. None of the first-round picks, Cleve Ferrell or Josh Jacobs, got their option picked up. But I think everyone in Raider Nation kind of saw the writing on the wall when it came to Johnathan Abram. You knew that, 1, early in his career, his availability wasn't there. 2, he was a liability at times. I think Gus Bradley last season really was able to kind of get the most out of him, get the best out of him. And one of the biggest questions that we had when it came to Johnathan Abram heading into this season with Patrick Graham was, how is Patrick Graham going to use him? How is he going to fit in his scheme? And how is he going to get the most out of him? Similar to what Gus Bradley did a season ago. Gus Bradley now with the Indianapolis Colts. Maybe they pick him up. He has to clear waivers, or he can be claimed off of waivers by the Colts or any other team. If not, he has to clear waivers, and then he can sign with anyone as a free agent, similar to what Sidney Jones did with the Raiders earlier this week on Monday. But, just getting back to John Abram and, the fact that he ended up being another miss, right? And the Raiders have plenty of first-round misses, and we'll go over that in just a little bit. But, Johnathan Abram, you saw his play, his time getting reduced. They were out there. There was rumors about him being on the trade block. There was rumors that there was teams that were interested, but clearly they didn't want to give up what the Raiders wanted to get in return from John Abram, so they held on to him. They reduced his snaps defensively and increased his snaps on special teams. So when you see that, right, when you're a player in the league, and especially a former first-round pick, and you see that your defensive snaps have all of a sudden been reduced, but now your special team snaps have been increased, that kind of lets you know that, the end is getting near when it comes to your career. And look, the only thing that I was really surprised about when I found out the news on Tuesday, and it was funny, I was I did record the Raider Roundtable with JT the Brick and Lincoln Kennedy. I didn't get to do one last week because I was out of town. I was in Arizona watching my son, Lil Q, play against Arizona, the Western Oregon basketball team play against Arizona. So I didn't get to participate in that Raider Roundtable. Eddie Pascal filled in for me, but I was back at it on Tuesday at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center. It's so funny. We recorded pretty early in the morning, like 9:30 in the morning Pacific time. Every single Tuesday, it feels like, when we're done recording, I leave the facility, I get back to the radio station, I get out of my meeting with my boss, all of a sudden, news drops. I was like, man, didn't even get a chance to talk about it on the podcast. That always happens. But then I know, don't worry, the Locked On Raiders podcast, I'll be able to talk about it, and I'll talk about it on the radio as well. But it's so funny, whenever we record that show, it seems like news drops with the Silver and Black following that. So, of course, we got the news about that on Tuesday, a little bit later on in the afternoon. And really, the only thing that surprised me about the move was the timing. I mean, that was really it, because I'm looking at it like Divine Diablo just got placed on IR. So, he's going to be out 4 weeks. And from what Vinny Bonsignore was saying when he was on my radio show on Tuesday, it sounds like it might be even longer than 4 weeks. I just assumed, and assuming is bad, I just assumed he was going to be out about 4 games and then be able to return. But from what it sounds like from Vinny, and he's an insider who gets to talk to GM Dave Ziegler all the time. He gets to talk to the head coach. I mean, he's one of those guys that he doesn't say stuff for no reason, right? He doesn't just kind of throw stuff out there in hopes that it sticks. Vinny knows his stuff, and that's why I always enjoy one, talking to him and hearing what he's got to say and his insight. He does a really good job. But he was saying, from what it sounded like, he's probably going to be out a little bit longer than 4 weeks. So with that knowledge, I was kind of surprised that they moved on from Johnathan Abram, only because he really kind of plays that linebacker role, even though we know that he's a safety by, trait and term, and as he's listed his position, but really he plays up near the line of scrimmage and could provide that extra thump, come downhill and hit somebody. And so that's kind of what he does. And that's what Gus Bradley did really well with him. And that's really how Patrick Graham has been using him as well. But, early in the season, he was playing that 2 high safety role with Trayvon Merrick. It was him and Trayvon Merrick. And then at some point, Jerron Harmon became the full-time starter along with Trayvon Merrick when Trayvon was out there, as opposed to Johnathan Abram. Johnathan Abram, again, has gotten his snaps reduced. So not a big surprise, but Paul Gutierrez, he tweeted out, and he's from ESPN, does a fantastic job as well. He tweeted out some stats on John Abram that I wanted to go over real quick here in segment number 1. He said, 1, with Abrams released by the Raiders, there's only 11 of the 23 players drafted in 3 years under Mayock and Gruden. Just 2 of the 6 first-rounders are still with the team. The 11 that are still there, Cleve Farrell, Josh Jacobs, Crosby, Foster Moreau, Hunter Renfrow, John Simpson, Amik Robertson, Trayvon Merrick, Malcolm Kuntz, Divine Diablo, and Nate Hobbs. Farrell and Jacobs could easily be gone after this season. They got their fifth-year options declined. Simpson, he hasn't seen the field in a while just because, well, he's basically a liability. Amik Robertson, he's got a lot to prove to this staff as well. So that number could be cut in half, if not more, by the end of the season. But Paul goes on to say, per ESPN Stats Info, there are 121 players who have logged at least 1,000 coverage snaps since 2019. Follow me here, Raider Nation. Abram has allowed the second highest completion percentage as a nearest defender among those players per NFL Next Gen Stats. Desmond King, 71.7%. John Abram, 70.7%. Also, compared how Abram did when he was lined up against a slot receiver versus when he was in traditional safety alignment. He was far better as a safety, which is scary. Johnathan Abram, completion percentage allowed as a nearest defender with the slot. As being a slot cornerback, 81.4, which is 98th out of 101. Safety, 61.5, 75th out of 123 with a minimum of 200 coverage snaps. So, I mean, it just kind of lets you know. And we all know that coverage was Johnathan Abram's, that was his weakness, right? So you don't want to get him in coverage. The Chiefs did it all the time. They exploited him. I had plenty of people hit me up, was like, man, the Chiefs are probably upset that the Raiders released him because they do so well against Johnathan Abram. And again, there's been times when we as radio guys have suggested maybe even sit Johnathan Abram for this Chiefs game because, man, they sure do take advantage of him, right? So real quickly, final thing here for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, kind of news and notes of the day, wrapping it up when it comes to first-round picks in the Raiders. Ari Mayrod from Pro Football Focus does a fantastic job. He's been on my radio show multiple times. He tweeted out 2021 Raiders first-round picks from 2019 to 2021. 2021, Alex Leatherwood, cut. 2020, Henry Ruggs III, cut. 2020, Damon Arnett, cut. 2019, Johnathan Abram, cut. 2019, Josh Jacobs, fifth-year decline. 2019, Cleve Farrell, fifth-year decline. So all those guys are no longer with the Silver and Black for one reason or the other, right? They just weren't any good. Damon Arnett was a bad dude. Henry Ruggs was a whole total nother situation. Johnathan Abram just wasn't, cutting it. Josh Jacobs and Cleve Farrell get their fifth-year options declined, as well as John Abram. And Josh Jacobs has really been the only one that has shined with all that being said. So there's that. Just a lot of misses when it comes to the first-round picks with the Raiders. I mean, really, you go back to it, the only guy who made it was Colton Miller. He got a contract extension. That was the first draft pick, the first-round draft pick in the Gruden era, and he actually got a contract extension. The rest of them, not so much. So that's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Coming up with segment number 2, I don't think the Raiders have any excuse to lose to the Colts on Sunday. Not saying they can't, because you can lose to anybody on any given Sunday, but the Raiders really have no business losing. I'll tell you why coming up in segment number 2. Before I get to that, though, I do want to talk about one of the great sponsors we have here on the show today on the Locked On Raiders podcast, and that is Simply Safe. If you ever thought about securing your home with home security, you just been putting it off? Well, you want to listen up, and you'll want to listen up right now. The Locked On Raider podcast listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify that the threat is real, so you can get priority police response. Simply Safe is whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door. HD security cameras for inside and out. Smarter ways to detect motion that alert you only when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. 24/7 professional monitoring service costs less than $1 a day, less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system. With the top-rated Simply Safe app, stay in complete control of your system. Anytime, anywhere, arm or disarm, unlock for a guest, access your cameras, or adjust system settings. Don't miss your chance to save on the only security system I would recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/lockedon today. It's the biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplysafe.com/lockedon NFL. There's no safe like Simply Safe. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. I want to let you know why I believe the Raiders have no business, and I mean no business, losing this game on Sunday to the Colts. Now, let me throw out a disclaimer before we get started. I know any team can lose to any team on any given Sunday, Monday, Thursday, whatever the case may be. I get that. And look, the Raiders aren't some juggernaut that is just knocking every single team off. But when I look at teams that are in shambles, I look at the Raiders and say, man, they're in a bad place right now. But I look at the Colts and say, that over there is a mess. I mean, just an absolute train wreck of a mess. I don't know if they're going for the #1 overall pick. I don't know what the case may be, but they got a lot of weird going on. The Colts fired their head coach, Frank Reich, on Monday. Okay, we know that. That's not earth-shattering news. That was something that I think even after the game on Sunday, Frank Reich knew that the writing was on the wall. That was going to happen. Okay, fine. No doubt. We know that they have a quarterback in Sam Ehlinger who is, a backup at best probably in the NFL. We get that. We know that they've dealt with injuries. I get that as well. But man, let me tell you, they are just in a bad place. Oh, and by the way, on top of that, they also hired a coach in Jeff Saturday, who's never been a head coach in the NFL, has never had NFL coaching experience. Matter of fact, has never coached higher than the high school level, and he wasn't very good at that. But Jeff Saturday, a very well-respected guy across the league, a guy that played offensive line for very long in the league, and again, is a dude that many people respect, and I know that those players in the locker room probably respect him. I'm sure some of the coaches that are currently on that staff respect him because they played with him, like Reggie Wayne and others, but, I mean, the dude has no experience, and on top of that, they have a play caller that is, 30 years old and has never called plays in the NFL, and they're going to travel to Las Vegas to take on the Raiders, who have a ton of talent and have just severely underachieved this season. And when I say a ton of talent, I mean they have some really good weapons offensively, right? I mean, we already kind of talked about the talent. I kind of get ahead of myself and say they have a ton of talent when really the cupboard is not as full as I thought it was heading into the season. We realize where the top end talent is at and where it's not. So let me take that back. They don't have a ton of talent, but they got more talent than those cats, right? And you know that they could be a lot better than those cats. Well, on Tuesday on Raider Nation Radio 920 Unnecessary Roughness, I had my guy Derek Schultz on the show, and he covers all Indianapolis sports. He's been covering it for a very long time. Really good dude. So as I was wrapping up the interview, I just asked him straight up, like, okay, Derek, I know this about Jeff Saturday. He's a guy that is very he can pump up guys. He can get people motivated. He's a guy that's very passionate. He's going to be a big rah-rah guy. I mean, he's probably a guy that if I was going to play for someone, I'd probably want to play for a guy like that because I think that he's going to have me running out of the locker room pretty fired up. But that doesn't mean that he knows how to coach, right? Again, he has no NFL coaching experience whatsoever, and he's got coaches on the staff like a Gus Bradley, like a John Fox that have both been head coaches. They got guys on the coaching staff that have plenty of experience in the NFL, but yet they are not the interim head coach. So that's a whole nother subject. But I asked Derek straight up, I said, so what do you expect from this team? What do you expect to see? Who are these Colts? And look, we got the crossover edition coming on the show tomorrow. So we'll definitely deep dive into all the different ins and outs of the Colts. But just in a nutshell, here's what Derek Schultz had to say about the Colts and why I believe that the Raiders have no business whatsoever losing to them on Sunday?
I'm hoping that this will be a little bit of a rallying cry because it's been embarrassing, whether the Colts want to admit it or not, whether their players don't want to admit it or not. That loss to New England was a new low in a season that is full of lows. So I do think that they'll get this is kind of a mean way to put it, guys. I think the Colts will have a little bit of a dead cat bounce here where, they kind of temporarily bounce back just slightly. But look, and I know the Raiders have their own problems. This team can't score. They can't block. They can't protect. They can't run. They can't throw. They don't score points. So it's really hard to win NFL games, even with offense down across the board. I mean, how many 20-17 type games have we seen this year?
Yeah.
Even with offense down across the board, this team can't score enough points. They've scored 21 points once this entire season. Once. They're averaging 14 a game. Even in the 1960s, 14 a game would put you in last in the league. So it's not a functional NFL offense right now, and that's what gives me a lot of pause thinking that they have a chance in any of these games. I mean, they got the Texans. They've got a terrible Pittsburgh team still coming here. So, there are going to be, I guess, opportunities for them to be the second worst team on the field, I guess. But it doesn't feel likely that that's going to happen multiple times.
So there you go. I wrote down the notes. So let me pull it out. Can't score, can't block, can't throw, can't run. They don't score points. They average 14 points a game. Sam Ehlinger, by the way, and Derek didn't even mention this, has never thrown an NFL touchdown. Not one. And they've only scored 21 points one time. Now, it's funny. All those reasons right there will make you say, yeah, Q, there's no way that this team is going to beat the Raiders. But that also, at the same time, as much as I think the Raiders have no business losing to them because of all these facts that I just pointed out, wrote them down. Look, I'll show you. If you're looking at YouTube, I wrote them down. It's right there. I wrote them down just so I made sure I got it right. If the Raiders defensively go out there and allow Sam Ehlinger to throw a touchdown pass or two, or get comfortable, or score more than 14 points, which is their average, or hell, hit 21 for the second time. You know what I mean? Like, that scares me because the Raiders, as we've seen, have let guys like Davis Mills get comfortable and look good and have the Houston Texans leading going into the fourth quarter, even though the Raiders turned it around and whooped them in the fourth quarter, which is great. But can you imagine what will happen? I don't think coaches are going to get fired this season. I really don't. Josh McDaniels, I'm very comfortable in saying he's not going to get fired this season. I think that there's a long-term plan in place. But can you imagine if all of a sudden the Raiders defense goes out there and Sam Ehlinger looks good, or all of a sudden the run game is cooking, or, all of a sudden the offensive line looks really good, like Max Crosby doesn't get any sacks on Sunday? Like, this is a game I expect what the old school players used to call a Pro Bowl game. This is where stats are made. This is where incentives are made, right? When you're in week 10 of the NFL season, week 9 of your ninth game of the season, and you have an opportunity to go out there and have a statistically big-time game. That's what I'm expecting from a Max Crosby. This is what I'm expecting from a Josh Jacobs. This is what I'm expecting from a Devontae Adams and Derek Carr. I'm not saying that it's all going to happen, but that's what these players in their mind should be. Hey, you know what? These cats are coming to our house. They're a wounded duck, and we're going to step on their neck. We're going to step on their neck the minute that they hit the field. And if they don't, if they allow the Colts to go over 14 points, if they allow them to score 21 or more for only the second time all season long, then shame on them, right? I mean, really. And again, as I mentioned at the top, any NFL team can have a good day, and any NFL team could go on a roll. I totally get that, right? And they can win. I mean, things happen, but too many times in Raiders history, not just this year, but too many times in Raider history, have they all of a sudden played down to the level of the competition and allowed that team to look really good. I mean, look at the Jaguars. They were on a 5-game losing streak, and the Raiders took that L. Look at the Saints, and I know that they have some firepower with Alvin Kamara and others, but, I mean, the Saints look terrible. They look terrible all season long. Then all of a sudden, they go and pitch a shutout against the Raiders, and then you saw what they did on Monday night against the Ravens, not looking so good at all, right? I mean, it's just – the Raiders can't be the get-right game, right? I mean, how many times have we said that going into different games? Oh, this is going to be the get-right game. The Denver Broncos, they look bad. That's going to be the get-right game. Well, the Raiders won that one. The Texans, this is going to be the get-right game. Well, they won that one too. The Jaguars, it's going to be the get-right game. Well, they took that L. There is no reason at all. Again, we'll get into all the ins and outs of the Colts. We got the crossover edition coming up tomorrow, so that'll be fun. But, man, I'll tell you right now, if Jeff Saturday, I said this joke on the radio on Tuesday. I felt pretty good about myself. If Jeff Saturday has himself a field day on Sunday, all hell's going to be paid on Monday. Right? I mean, that's simple as that. Jeff Saturday goes to Allegiant Stadium, pulls out a dub for the Colts on Sunday, then all bets are off come Monday. And all bets should be off. There is absolutely no reason whatsoever why the Colts should roll out of Allegiant Stadium with a dub. There isn't, but the only thing is there could be because, well, that's just, it's the nature of the game. But man, the Raiders, if you're the Raiders and you're in that locker room, you have to let it be known. Not today, not on my watch. I'm not going to be that team. I know this team is backed into the corner and everyone looks terrible. And, there's a lot of questions around them, but we ain't going to be that get right team. That's what the Raiders need to say. You don't need no bulletin board material. What you need to do is have a little bit of pride, a little sense of what's that commitment to excellence. You need to have a little bit of commitment to excellence, at least on Sunday. You ain't been excellent all season long. Be excellent on Sunday. And don't let this team with these kind of stats and these kind of numbers come in and embarrass you. Straight up. Sam Ehlinger walks out of there with multiple touchdowns. Even if the Raiders win, that's going to be a bad day at the office. Straight up. Because he hasn't thrown one touchdown in the NFL to this point so far. We'll see. That's all I got for you for segment number 2. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Now, a word from our sponsor. And our sponsor is Blue Nile. Whether you're looking to pop the question, have a milestone to celebrate, or want to let your love sparkle, Blue Nile can help you make your celebrations even more memorable. As the original online jeweler, Blue Nile offers the largest selection of independently graded diamonds and pieces priced significantly below traditional retailers. Blue Nile has helped millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring. Their easy online tools let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as the setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then help you handcraft her perfect one-of-a-kind engagement ring. If you're looking for a piece of fine jewelry to commemorate a special milestone, but you're having trouble choosing, no worries. Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available by phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Shop stress-free with Blue Nile's 100% satisfaction guarantee, and all Blue Nile orders are insured and shipped for free in discreet packaging. They also offer overnight shipping if you're in a rush. Make your moment sparkle with Blue Nile. Go to BlueNile.com. Use that promo code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's BlueNile.com. BlueNile.com. Promo code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. BlueNile.com. Promo code Locked On. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's jump right into the first call from King Raider. He's calling to talk about the waiving of Johnathan Abram. Also talks about the defense and what he thinks he needs to see happen. Here he is, King Raider, calling out of L.A.
Hey, what's up, Q? It's your boy King Raider from out here in L.A. Cali. Man, just quick call. What's up with this that we let go of Johnathan Abram, man? That's some BS. I know, over half of the nation doesn't like him, but I do. I got it seriously. Dude plays his heart out. He keeps going up every season. You use him the right way. He balls out, man. I don't know. Disappointing in that. Want to talk about the defense, I know. But if we want to talk about the defense, we should be looking more by the way the coach is calling the plays and the way he's putting the plays in precision and not using them the way they're supposed to be used or the best way they can be used. Instead of getting rid of players that play with their heart out. Just got rid of anybody else, but I mean, if you're going to get rid of him, you might as well bring somebody like Sue to help out Crosby since Chandler ain't doing it. I mean, anything at this point to help out Crosby and get that defense going. Just disappointed in that, Q. Let me know your thoughts. Raider Nation. Just win, baby.
Thanks for the call, my man. And like I said in segment number 1, I feel like the writing was on the wall. The timing was a little off to me, but obviously the regime, the coaching staff, they saw enough of what they needed to see. They're ready to move on. And again, I mentioned it. It's evaluation season. Remember, I said that after the Saints loss. It is officially evaluation season. Well, guess what, Raider Nation? This is evaluation that's going on right now. There's probably going to be some young dudes that get an opportunity to get some burn. I don't see the Raiders bringing in anybody that is high dollar at this stage of the game. It's going to be a bunch of young dudes, or like in the case of Sidney Jones, a guy like him, bring him in and give him an opportunity to see what they got. They're looking to see who they're going to be moving forward with. They're not looking to bring in an old veteran like an Ndamukong Suh that's going to cost a bunch of money. They're just not at this stage of the game. But thank you so much for that call. I do appreciate you. How about a text from Sean Man in the Quad Cities? Yo, this is Sean Man from the Quad Cities. Called a few days ago about DC. He's looking mentally exhausted exhausted in general. After seeing the post game on Sunday, I just wanted to retouch on the subject. I know he gets paid the big boy bucks to deal with this stuff, but he has to be tired of this rebuild after rebuild. New office after new office, new coach after new coach. I know a lot of people want to blame Carr, but we know who he is. Our defense is trash. I know we're missing a few people, but dang, outside of Max Crosby, we're getting no pressure. We could have used that money for Chandler Jones and got a shutdown corner and a better offensive line. Could have spread that money, could have spread that money around the linebacker room so much more. We could have done with it. But once again, the Raiders overpaid players in his 30s that are outside of their prime. Fell for fool's gold once again. 25 years I've been alive, and I look forward to every time they play. I'm a diehard fan, but at what point do they turn the table and actually become competitive again? At this point, telling myself next year will get better, it's just a joke. Love you, Raider Nation. You guys all deserve better than this. Again, that's Sean Mann in the Quad Cities, and yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And Derek Carr is the guy that's going to go out there and he's going to face the music. He is. And, he's got some of the blame as well. I mean, look, the Raiders offense wasn't able to generate anything on Sunday. So, some of that was on him. He missed guys that were open. He missed opportunities to run the ball with his, and he can do it. He missed a few opportunities for big plays. I mean, a lot of it goes on him as well, but a lot of it goes on the players in general, just not executing. I think Lincoln Kennedy told me best on Tuesday. He said, Q, right now, this team is just a bunch of individuals. At times, they are a tandem, so there's like a 1-2 punch, but it's not one team. And that's the biggest problem. They're not playing and they're not executing like a team. So that's something to pay attention to as well. Can they start acting like a team? They better be a team on Sunday versus the Colts, because the Colts are not a team and they're not good. So there's that. So thank you so much for that text. I do appreciate you. Let's see. One more call. Eric in the 209. He's calling to talk about this week's opponent in the Colts, and sounds very similar to my thoughts from segment number 2. Here he is, Eric in the 209.
Hey, Q, it's Eric in the 209. Just calling with my thoughts on this week. If this Raiders team cannot beat a Colts team that hired Jeff Saturday as their head coach, who has an absolute total of 0 coaching experience under his belt, not in the pros, not in college, an offensive coordinator who's younger than me, who will be playing or calling the plays, and a quarterback in Sam Ehlinger who is completely inept, that somebody's head will need to roll if they cannot beat this team. They are probably the one team in the league that looks more lost than the Raiders at this point. And if they can't pull together to beat this team at home, then the metaphorical poop has hit the fan, and this season is just completely on fire. If they can't come together to beat this team that is in complete and total shambles, then they don't deserve to win another game this year. Eric in the 209 out.
Thank you for the call, Eric. I do appreciate you. And yeah, man, there's really no excuse. It's no excuse to lose to the Colts on Sunday. But again, any team could go in and win, and a lot of times teams have a lot of energy and a lot of extra focus when it's a new voice in the room. But even with this new voice in the room, there should be no reason for the Raiders to lose this game. But we will see. We will definitely see how it goes. So thank you so much for that. I do appreciate you. Let's see. I think I got time for one more call. JC in San Diego. He's calling to talk about the team and the issues they're facing and what he believes the ultimate issue is. Here he is, JC in San Diego.
Hey, Q. This is JC over here in San Diego. Great job on the podcast, by the way. Continue with the good work. Yeah, I had to call in. I think it's going to work as therapy for me, because I'm trying to make sense of all this, what's been happening. And it seems like every week we keep reaching new lows, new Raider lows, historically. I think you're right from what you were saying. I think it comes all down to talent level. We don't have the talent on this. And I know everybody's saying, oh, it's a talented team. I really, really don't see what we're talking about when we say, and besides Max, Devontae, that's a talent. That's all the talent. It's just
it's a result of all these drafts that we have missed year after year after year, dating back. We're talking 10 years at least. We've missed. We don't have one first round. Our defense is nothing but backup players. Besides Max, our defense, we're going to fire our coordinator most likely, which is not even his fault. He's playing with a bunch of backups. That's what he's coaching. Besides Max, there's nothing but backup players and players that nobody on other teams wanted. You know, it's I think we're farther away than we are close. We thought we were close. You know, we complained about how the national media was giving us no respect in the preseason. Oh, I think they were right. You know, they were right. They know. How does Rich Eisen feel right now? You know, he put himself out there. Was clearly a bad call. I don't know. Man, this is low. I just had to call in. I guess like I said, it's going to work for therapy because I don't know where we're going from here. We got to blow this thing up. Carr, I've always been a Carr supporter. I think it's finally time to move on. We got to blow this thing up. We're farther away than we are close. There's no talent on this team. Q, I'll let you go. Thanks for the therapy. You can charge me later. Thanks. Have a good day.
JC, thanks so much for that call. I appreciate you, my man. You're right. You know, it seems like it's a lot clearer now that they're just not as talented as we, and when I say we, I really mean me, is what I thought heading into the season. The Devontae Adams trade and acquisition of Chandler Jones really kind of blinded my judgment to me thinking, you know what, this team is a lot better than I thought it was and a lot more talented than I thought it was. Outside of a couple key guys, and of course missing Darren Waller is a big deal as well. You know, he hasn't played in a while, and that's hurting the performance of the offense. But really, a lot of that, you know, falls on me for thinking that this team was too talented or way more talented than they really were. I still think they can compete with anyone with the offense, but the defense, man, they're going to have to win shootouts. No doubt about it. They're not going to be able to win games because the defense is the strength. It's going to all go back to the offense. But thank you so much for that call, JC. I do appreciate you. And that's going to do it for today's show, Raider Nation. That's all I got for you. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have the crossover edition. We'll really deep dive into the Indianapolis Colts and give you more reason to know that there's no reason why the Raiders lose this game on Sunday. But again, we'll talk about that tomorrow. We'll see if there's any more news and notes that rolls out. We'll have plenty to talk about on the podcast for sure. We'd like to thank you so much for making the show your first listen each and every day. Remember, you can find the show free and available on all platforms. Until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Love on your family. Check us out on YouTube if you get an opportunity. And shout out my guy, Ari, at Ari Produces on Twitter. Is doing a fine job. But most importantly, Raider Nation, as always, just win, baby.